A very big part of the XRP community is in a bit of a tussle right now over a very specific question. Could XRP ever be backed by gold? Anyway, there was a video published by Crypto Lulu a couple days ago that talked about a potential end goal XRP scenario where XRP basically becomes like a stable coin with a gold backing. And let me tell you that I've never seen the community be as divided as surrounding this topic. And so before we move on, I want to ask all of you to leave a comment down below. Do you think XRP could be backed by gold? Do you think XRP will back gold to some degree? Or if you think all of this is nonsense or you just don't understand it. Again, in this video, I'm going to try explain a little bit as to the idea as to why it might be possible. On the contrary, I'll also explain to you guys why it certainly might not be possible. And we'll go a little bit over what I think is going to happen to XRP in the near future and why I'm so excited to hold it, basically. Anyway, in 2012, David Schwartz, Jed McCallum, and Arthur Biddle launched the XRP ledger with its native currency XRP as a faster, more energy-efficient alternative to Bitcoin. One of the parts that makes the XRP ledger quite unique is that it was really the first of its kind to do something along these lines. And with that came this first mover advantage of getting a lot of partners due to you having developed something that the rest of the world basically hasn't really thought of before. Anyway, they focused on this payment realm, especially micropayments, and along with its native coin XRP, the XRP ledger can also be used by developers to create all sort of solutions that solve inefficiencies, including remittance and asset tokenization. We talked about this on multiple different occasions that almost anything in theory could be tokenized and be built or be placed upon the XRP ledger. Many theories in the past have fetched a price goal for XRP based on what could be tokenized in terms of assets. And sometimes people say, well, gold will basically be tokenized and placed on top of the XRP ledger. And for that reason, the XRP price basically would have to encompass all that's been tokenized on top of it. And as you guys might or might not know, many people in the community have been going back and forth about these ridiculous XRP and gold price tags based partially on the fact that the price is just too high or it doesn't work that way. And a similar thing is happening with this gold discussion where a lot of people are saying, hey, the point of this is probably malicious. This is no longer ignorance. This is deliberately misleading people. XRP cannot be backed by another asset, or an inflationary asset can't back a deflationary asset. Gold being the inflationary asset, and XRP, since all the tokens are already out there, being a deflationary asset, as it will never be above 100 billion XRP. Well, almost certainly never. Never say never, but you understand. To quickly point in, what I'm saying is there was 100 billion XRP created, of which 80 billion was gifted to Ripple. And even though about 55 billion XRP were locked up in 2017 and a billion gets released every single month and it's, locked back up into escrow, officially those coins have already been mined. And so even they've been placed under restrictions and on CoinMarketCap, etc., it does not fall under the tokens that are circulating. It's because they're hidden behind some sort of wall. But it's the same thing as me putting it in some sort of savings account where I lock it up for a couple of years. It's already out there. The money is mine. I've just put it behind a little bit of a wall. In theory, though, there could be votes on whether or not to increase this number. And that's why I'm saying in theory, it's not always official, all these numbers of supply. But in practice, I don't really see any reason as to why they might want to upgrade it, which is, again, based upon why XRP was created, which we're going to get to in just a second. I just wanted to make this point clear of there's a very big battle between people saying, no, these are all lies for clicks. It doesn't make sense. It's not possible. With the quote that I just read from my phone being from Matt Hamilton on a previous little clip that Mr. Lulu shared. Again, have to also make it clear, no hate towards Lulu. He's sharing his own opinion. He's sharing a video of what he's found, and I'm not the judge to say whether or not it's malicious or actually factual, because in a sense, he's doing research, he found out a couple of different things, he explains why he thinks XRP could be backed by gold, and at the end of the day, it's your own choice to believe it or not, right? Let's dive a little bit more into what exactly XRP is built for. Typically, XRP is created to serve as a settlement layer, facilitating the transactions within the Ripple network. Not solely, but typically. Again, like we already stated, it was mostly built, that's what it says in the literature, because Bitcoin was so limited, with the initial idea being mostly for peer-to-peer based payments. And again, you have to understand, I think the vision was rewritten multiple times, or at least the public vision was done that way. It could, in theory, be so that a master plan was already built in, for example, 2009, but things were only starting to get into place in 2012, then changed in 2013 and then in 2015, because also the company name from Ripple changed from Newcoin to OpenCoin to Ripple Labs to Ripple. And it could be that the vision changed as time progressed or the amount of success progressed. And like I just said, they had this first mover advantage to a massive degree where it could literally be so that they didn't expect this much adoption when they were actually creating this vision and this idea. And the moment that they saw some traction, they changed their plans from being a small coin being created between the peoples to, okay, we're going to take this on big. And what I mean with that is, in the midst of this, I'd like to make one thing clear. In my whole research here, my whole theory, we could talk about many different reasons as to why it was built, but one of the things I cannot grasp my head around is a theory that it was built with the idea of being bought back at a crazy high price, and ex-Ripple developers, but even the creator of the XRP ledger says, well, it's not really something that he agrees with, basically. And you have to understand, this man is not afraid of explaining that the XRP being at a higher price, for example, would be extremely beneficial. And this is back in 2017, for example. But I've got this tweet properly stored because the moment that he posted this, I've been in the community for so many years. It sparked something in my mind thinking these guys are onto something. And this was already 5 years into the building process. Anyway, as I said, the whole buyback, most developers and most of the XRP people, Ripple people that we've seen talk on Twitter and at these interviews and whatnot, they've basically given this notion of it doesn't really make much sense. There's no employee ever that's denied, however, that a higher price per XRP would not be quote unquote better. And so the only question you can ask yourself here is, was it designed to be stable, or was it designed to be, since it's deflationary, to be ever increasing with the necessity and, well, as more and more volume flows within Ripple, which we can talk about for a little while as to how they designed for this system to keep increasing and keep becoming more secure and more rigid. But let's just quickly take a look at this specific little piece that the CTO of Ripple and the co-creator of the XRP ledger shared about 5 years ago. The most obvious benefit to Ripple of an increased price of XRP is that it increases the value of Ripple's XRP. Obviously, indirectly, more value almost always means more liquidity and trade volume. XRP already has each of the other characteristics needed to be a good intermediary asset, which again is the public vision that Ripple has stated for it many times, even though there's another one which we're covering in just a second. But it will be initially limited by the available liquidity. Greater liquidity will give Ripple more flexibility to target larger corridors. So for the true potential to be unlocked, higher prices are basically necessary. Also, to some extent, Ripple's success is limited by people's perception of Ripple's success. Now, that statement I don't really like a lot, but it does make a lot of sense when you read further. If you think Ripple's payment tech is going to be the next big thing, you'll be willing to invest the money and resources needed to implement and deploy it. Now, as you dive throughout Twitter and you dive through all these different Bank of International Settlement documents, World Economic Forum documents, etc., what you'll notice is that very often these ideas are based upon the next big thing. We've talked many times before about the ISO 20022 standard, which includes XRP, XLM. You can just kind of look at the list for yourself for a little second, Algorand, XDC, QNT. And we've talked before about why, even though it's not crucial that anything conforms by the standard yet, it will be the new standard soon, and it can make things just a lot simpler to be integrated into the main system. The more important factor to look at and think about here is that a huge amount of trust is necessary, and this links back with the first mover advantage of why would any one of these major institutions, why would any one of these major banks that's now working with Swift, working now with a pretty rigid system, ever switch up? And again, part of this has to do with the new wave. All these major banks and all these major platforms know this Web3 space, this cryptocurrency, blockchain tech space, it's the future, and let's adopt it as soon as possible. We've seen, however, an awful lot of these major players in the game, these regulators or institutions also trying to push it down, with, for example, XRP really being downplayed a lot by a lot of the media and them not trying to get all the information out there about the strange SEC politics. Another good example is Mr. Charlie Munger and his stance upon the crypto space. And the CNBC anchor had a nice little view on it, which I did share. Let's quickly watch that.
I don't think the first page of the Bitcoin Standard or whatever book you want to go to, I don't think he's read the first page. And I mean, that's the most pedestrian viewpoint that I've heard from people for 20 years. They all say the same thing. None of them know anything about it.
And yeah, like he already says right here, a lot of these guys either don't know a lot about it, which I don't agree with. I think they just don't want you to be involved, which is why we're seeing all these new rules for custodians in the US, why we're seeing all these lawsuits, etc., to make it more difficult for the common player to be involved in the crypto space. But let's take it all back a little step to what we were initially talking about. It was about this idea that it just kind of depends on what your belief is in Ripple's payment tech and what you think it's going to be. If you think it's going to be the next big thing, you'll be willing to invest money there. And that's one of the biggest hurdles in any emerging technology that's disruptive to this degree, that it takes a whole lot of convincing to make a dent in the system, especially with the way in which Ripple has built things. They are very controversial in the major landscape because it's very new technology and very, very different from what they've been used to for all these decades. And now Lulu also shared an interesting piece from the World Economic Forum that kind of makes it clear these major institutions, they rightfully so, have a little bit of a negative stance towards this crypto space from the get-go. Listen to it.
This is global in nature. Many of
let me not. I watch things in 2 times speed. Let me not do that.
these crypto assets are offered from places that I would call sunny places for shady people.
Could you give an example?
Well, I think we all know the kind of locations that we're talking about. So we need to have a global framework to regulate this. It doesn't make sense to just have national approaches. I think this is truly global, global in nature. And so we have been working concretely, and then I'll stop, on updating our regulations on global stablecoin arrangements and coming forward with a new set of recommendations for what we call unbacked crypto assets or other crypto assets. They are now in the open for consultation. So we are looking forward very much for sort of the responses.
It's the first pitch of the panel, people.
Yeah, and then we hope to finalize these 2 sets of recommendations by the summer of this year.
And listening to that is only a very small piece of understanding that things are changing, and they're changing a lot. But he also said something about unbacked cryptocurrencies, basically, or crypto assets. And you saw Brett Gullinghouse sitting there. Now, we can dive in to that specific part of this unbacked and backed. Because like I just said, there are many people going over on Twitter to basically go back and forth about these discussions of in which little bracket XRP would fall into. Would it become a backed cryptocurrency in a stablecoin category? Where exactly does it fall? And the problem is the answer is not really there because we don't, or at least are not fully able to see the distinction. What we can fetch from this video, though, is 2 additional things. One, it showcases where Ripple is standing. And so this big hurdle, like we just said, of Ripple needed to prove themselves to get into this space to really become some sort of standard. Well, it's been set because look at him sitting here at the World Economic Forum. This trust in XRP/Ripple, that whole hurdle has been overcome. And so when he's talking about that standard, the fact that she's asking him another question after the discussion I just showed you showcases that this is just an exciting path forward for them and all this regulatory stuff by the SEC. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's all just a big distraction, it seems, because in reality here, they're building something. Ripple is very much involved in all this, or at least that's their core plan. And they are, again, like I said, doing a lot more in the background than does meet the eye. But let's just quickly listen to a little piece here. Right after the whole story by Klaas, I can hear from the way he speaks, must be a Dutch guy. I can't confirm, but I think so. Listen to her little question to Brad.
It's a provider operating at the intersection of these very traditionally regulated financial institutions and less traditionally regulated, less traditional financial institutions.
It's exciting. I feel
So I missed a couple seconds just for context. She asked, like,
Brad, you have already made the distinction between XRP, the token, and Ripple, the company. You are the only, you're a regulated entity, or you're speaking on behalf of a regulated entity. When folks talk about, these different sorts of provisions, you are the person or your various teams doing the paperwork, providing evidence of baseline trustworthiness. What is it like to be a non-bank financial services provider operating at the intersection of these very traditionally regulated financial institutions and less traditionally regulated, less traditional financial institutions.
It's exciting. I feel a obligation to advocate for. There are these new technologies that we can use for the betterment of economic value to our citizens, to our businesses, even to central banks. And I think to the extent we can focus on, hey, these are new technologies that can be used in that way. Like the earliest days of the internet, can these technologies be used in illicit ways? Yes, and certainly we saw the early days of the internet and people called for bans of the internet.
And to be clear, the current days of the internet as well.
Oh, yeah, I guess, yeah. Well, although there was a much louder, higher decibel level call in maybe the 90s when people were, I think, more intimidated by how these technologies are being used. And I think we're seeing that play out in the world of blockchain as well. I thought it was interesting you described the UAE regulatory as light touch.
Said it was described as light touch.
Oh, described as light touch, all right. I actually give huge credit to the UAE.
Do you have a VARA license?
No, we do not. Although we might, I don't know the exact answer to that, but we do not currently.
Okay, I've been listening to it for a little while, and actually it's quite a difficult to share this full video of everything that he's saying, so I'm going to paraphrase the other parts. He's basically explaining, hey, Ripple is a properly regulated company to many degrees, so when they say crypto needs or this tech needs regulation, he's asking himself, like, what exactly does that mean? Because everything that Ripple does, it's already properly regulated. It's already between the lines. And he's explaining that whenever Ripple works and does stuff, it's always between two endpoints that are also properly KYC'd, are following proper AML laws. And so when a certain individual, Gary Gensler, calls this crypto stuff the Wild West, he doesn't really understand. Because he asks himself, what exactly does that mean when you say it's not properly regulated? And the point is, there's a lot of these bad actors that are doing bad business, but at the core of it all, there's many of these companies solving real-world problems, and most of the discussion that follows is around mostly that the crypto space is not regulated enough regarding like safe returns or promised returns, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the core problems regarding stablecoin regulations, if we look at BUSD and whatnot, and XRP's problem, well, they're funny enough glancing over that at almost any one of these meetings. But now let's look back at what my initial points were. And it mostly had to do with the fact that we were not sure exactly what Ripple's core mission was, if they were trusted, if the mission has changed, and what then would happen to XRP in the process. Now, we should also take a look at this quote by one of the XP Ledger co-founders saying, XRP must be scalable to accommodate 7.5 billion people. If we look at some of Brad Garlinghouse's tweets, though, we get kind of confused because what he said, at least one of his statements, was this. Thread on this USD as the world's reserve currency has been the backbone of our global financial infrastructure, and that position isn't going to disappear in favor of gold, the yuan, crypto, or any other asset anytime soon. But is it weaker today? Yes. This was in a response 2.5 years ago from Bloomberg, which says a guide to the pros and cons of the euro, gold, or crypto as the potential replacement for the dollar. He said a year ago, many decried crypto as a scam, and now a majority of governments are looking seriously at blockchain. It addresses frictions, i.e. settlement, transparency, etc., that were assumed very hard to solve before. Crypto is up 80%, while the US dollar is down. Now, as Fundstrat said, it comes down to trust in the financial system in a similar sense as it comes down to trust in Ripple, like we just saw from Mr. David Schwartz's statement in 2017. At the end of the day, and as global populations continue to lose confidence in fiat currencies, which we all know is happening, which is also why all these major central banks are buying massive amounts of gold. This is also from the World Economic Forum. We all know that. It's, again, very obvious as to why they're doing that. Nobody really knows what the next couple of years has to bring. And even though, in theory, many analysts are pointing that the S&P might have actually bottomed for the time being, it's only a question of when a major crash is yet going to happen and when a major crash on the dollar is going to happen, or just a little bit of the system falls apart with all this crazy inflation. As global populations continue to lose confidence in their fiat currencies, as we're also seeing with the US dollar, they will choose to diversify, which is what we've seen with gold, and which, even though XRP, gold, crypto, whatever, is not potentially here to replace the US dollar, which showcases not to be their goal from this tweet, it might be something that these global populations, as they lose confidence in their own fiat currencies, might want to diversify into. Which leads me to two different things. One, CBDCs to some degree, with XRP, Ripple, whatever being involved, or two, just XRP being diversified into, and the back end of that is still up to yourself, but that is something which indeed showcases from the tweet. our future global financial system will do the same. And that, again, would then include potentially Ripple, with them, again, losing faith in this current system with all the banking, etc., to this newer tech. And again, we have showcased now that the trust, just kind of seeing that they're at the World Economic Forum, just sitting right there in Ripple, is definitely there. All right, now, guys, I know I'm a little bit all over the place. This is the way I make these videos sometimes. I just gather hours and hours and hours of looking things up, getting multiple different ideas, and, put it into one thought video right here, a little thought dump. Let me actually share with you guys one of the most important videos. Just hopefully get you guys to acknowledge this technology, what it was built for, how things are changing. And again, now it's just a little piece to continue on with what XRP potentially was designed for. There are some controversies surrounding this video. It's 28 seconds, but listen to it, and I think you'll also see that this is quite an interesting little piece.
Issued 100 billion XRPs will be enough to cover once the X-Rapids service scales to a global full scale, or would there be a shortage?
Well, so when XRP was created, this actually was created before Ripple existed. The creators of XRP decided there'd be 100 billion units because they saw it as rather than having a smaller number with a very high price, they saw it as something they wanted to be effectively a global reserve currency.
And like I said, this whole story is quite difficult, which is why I wanted to make such a long video about it. But listening to that, we get confused again, because this showcases why they chose 100 billion XRP. It's quite close to being able to use every XRP as like a dollar, basically, which in that nature makes this statement from 2020 make more sense, where these banks might want to diversify, or these, I'd say, governments or major bodies might want to diversify with their fiat into some other things which are interoperable and, conform with the newer standard, the ISO 20022, and, XRP properly makes a good role for themselves, being designed for the purpose of being a reserve currency in that nature. But on the contrary, I sometimes think about it and look back at what we just saw before with David Swartz's explanation of why a higher price, with not necessarily a cap, would be more beneficial to Ripple. And he says it is also important that it not be terribly expensive to hold XRP, but we've already disputed that before, that if the XRP price goes higher and higher and higher, they could change the fee structure again, so that would never be a problem. But the point he was making was the fact that, the higher the price is, the better it gets in terms of volatility, and that also makes a whole lot of sense. When Bitcoin was sold for $1, you couldn't really use it to buy a house, etc. And if we now think back at this vision of two different things, one, XRP being partially created for these peer-to-peer payments, but also for the intermediary of many different things, and being conformed with the new standard and potentially be something that these major institutions diversify into. There needs to be a lot of money inside this ecosystem for it to make any sense, because if there's any one transfer of a significant sum of money, if all of a sudden you have a day with plus 50% or so, that does not work. So either the ecosystem needs to be large enough where it doesn't matter, or I'd say there's a couple other options. One is having something tokenized on top of the XRP ledger to transact this with, potentially another asset, which is why sometimes people say, okay, but these CBDCs could just be built on a private ledger, in a certain sense, just built on top of the XRP ledger that does not include XRP, but does include the ledger. But again, in his own words, bigger transactions require bigger value. The higher the price of XRP, the larger the payments Ripple can target. Now, I have one video, though, from actually today, even, I think. Yeah, from today, that showcases partial, I guess, Ripple competition. The video itself is older, but it was just shared today again. And it kind of showcases what they're competing with and why they need such high liquidity. Take a look.
Ripple decided early on that we wanted to be at kind of the infrastructure layer, and there's a whole bunch of strategic issues associated with that. One of them, quite frankly, is that if you work with regulated endpoints, that's where all the regulatory frameworks apply. KYC, know your customer, AML, anti-money laundering, all the acronyms. If you work just with regulated endpoints, they're making sure that that is the case. Companies like WeChat have to do that regulatory work themselves. Now, Swift is kind of a competitor. It's slightly more complicated than that, because Swift is really just messaging. When you send a Swift transfer, it's not liquidity. You're actually sending bank messages to banks that have liquidity. So to some degree, Citibank and HSBC, really the top two, JPM, those are the top three liquidity banks. And when you're sending Swift messages, you're sending messages to banks to release liquidity and making sure the debits and credits match. So to some degree, really boil it down, Ripple's competing with the liquidity of Citi and the messaging of Swift, but in one, because we're both messaging and liquidity.
So just watching that video, you can see their aspirations are quite big. And they launched their product recently, right, for their credit line. And so they're working towards this. But then again, because we've watched this now, it does make a lot of sense again that indeed they are looking forever, I guess, for a higher price per XRP, because in any way, shape, or form, with the competition that they're facing, this would be better. So from that perspective, a lot of these guys that claim that XRP was designed for X amount of dollars or whatnot, again, as long as it does not include the buyback theory, because there's not that much evidence which suggests this is true, and there's too many parties within Ripple that say it's just not the case. If we're just purely talking about the design in terms of price, there's not really any reason as to why somebody might say that, you know, a crazy high price like a $10,000 or so is impossible from the nature of what it was designed for. In a similar sense as they explained with Bitcoin, yeah, a Bitcoin at $1 really was quite cumbersome, really didn't work that well. And even though Bitcoin might have not actually be designed to be at $100,000 or so, inevitably it's going to happen. And as the process, I guess, continued on, as it got more popularity, in a similar sense as I just explained with Ripple, at the start, having this first mover advantage to a certain degree, but not really having all the trust, it's changed, and potentially so in time, as 2015, for example, rolled around, they changed this vision from being created at 100 billion XRP with an idea of being relatively stable, being relatively easy to use for peer-to-peer payments, to more of a bigger vision, being the main liquidity provider for the entire system, and just needing a ridiculously high price and having this potential value locked on top of it or inside of it be a lot higher to facilitate all their plans. Again, you have to see Ripple's vision as being the main provider of moving money around the world, being interoperable with as many systems as possible as trust increases, and for that, you do need a whole lot of money. And the transaction fee, some people sometimes came back upon, but that can be lowered. There's actually only a transaction fee on top of the XRP ledger to prevent spam. There's no transaction fee that's, you know, passed back onto the stakers or anything like that, because being or running a validator right now has no reward, which the CTO has explained is the best reward. But from that perspective, again, I'm going through so many different theories, so many different ideas. I'm just sharing all my thoughts today. A burn of XRP doesn't really make a lot of sense. That was one very big controversial piece a while ago as well, that they might burn a lot of that XRP. It doesn't make sense because the more tokens, in a certain sense, the easier, because then the price per token could be lower to actually still encompass more money. And so I'd say that a burn really doesn't make a lot of sense. They're just kind of shooting themselves in the foot, especially if they were to want to keep providing liquidity. They'd need a lot of XRP internally. So they definitely not get rid of all the tokens that they already own. Now, how big could it get then? What price could it get to? There's so many variables that come into play, but in reality, if you look at the back end, you know, properly backed by Google, properly backed by some of the most major VCs in the world, Ripple that is, right? They really have quite some disruptive technology. They're in all the best places already, and even though they're still called a startup, most of their numbers in terms of how they operate and do, they're pretty huge. The only thing that they're missing is all the connections as of this point, which has been drastically increasing. When we took a look at the Q4 report of 2022, we saw the ODL reach basically increase drastically for Ripple, and that's because even though the lawsuit is ongoing, the actual progression of Ripple in the background is certainly ongoing. And for that reason, all I can say about it is, well, Swift and even new technologies from Swift, they're just trusted right now because of name recognition that's been around for decades. But a disruptor in this payment landscape is always going to be discouraged because, well, nobody wants them. They all want to save money, but they only want to save money if they can do it in the safest way possible, because these are bankers. It's slow money in nature. So from that perspective, Ripple has like infinite potential, but it's on a longer time frame. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's hard to say if the US dollar will ever be dethroned. I personally think it will be, because on average, a global reserve currency, a world reserve currency, stays around for, let's say, 95 years, and the US has been on top for a little bit longer than that, so it's going to shift soon. So I'm going to have to disagree with Brad saying that the US will not be replaced anytime soon. I think it will be. And again, it gives the US such incredible leverage, such incredible power. It's logical to see why all these countries are accumulating gold like crazy, which is being confirmed. And again, it's saying that a cryptocurrency or something of that nature will be there is too far-fetched for right now. But to say it's going to be some CBDC of sorts, which is based upon the XP ledger, potentially, that's not too crazy. And having this notion in our head of right now they're working pretty hard from the fundamental layer up to get some sort of frameworks going that are basically on international grounds, not SEC based, which could potentially be very beneficial to XRP or realistically any single crypto. A question that must pop up in your mind is, why exactly would Ripple want gold in this nature? Why exactly would it have to do anything with that? Would it be necessary? And to that, my only answer is, well, it really just depends on your vision, because all of these goals could be achieved without realistically involving gold in any of it. I don't think XRP was designed to be a stable coin. Because even though in many senses it makes, in a lot of ways it makes sense, a good question is, what exactly would it be we be backed by? Again, I'll always leave this open for discussion, as we've also now seen, and I don't have an article for this, it's somewhere out there, I saw it, I read it earlier today. Even Binance right now is looking into new methods of stable coins basically that are not reliant on the US dollar, after again the SEC and NYDFS went after BUSD, so they're like, what exactly can we go for now? In that nature, I've been thinking, well, potentially, indeed, there's different sort of stable coins that will be built over the next couple of months or years here that are not necessarily reliant on the US dollar or even gold for that matter, that we just have not really thought of quite yet. What bothers me right now, though, the only part, is that one of the ex-Ripple developers is so much against this idea of an XRP backing, and it makes me wonder, why is he such an advocate for saying that this is misleading when all he's saying is a gold-backed agnostic currency is coming to XRP? Again, I took a screenshot last night of what him, so Crypto Lulu, and Matt got into because it was deleted, so you can't find it anymore, but I took a screenshot. I do that sometimes. Point being, that statement I see could be a little bit misleading because it's like a confirmed thing. But here he says Ripple XRP checks all the boxes for gold backing, and it makes me think, from a certain perspective, I think it's allowed to say it has a lot of the potential for gold backing. It checks a lot of boxes. He explains more than I do. But the only question is, why would that be the only option? Wouldn't there be many other options for backing that we really haven't thought of before, in a similar sense as Ripple is disruptive in this technology space because they're doing something that's really not been thought of before in the first movers? So wouldn't it be more easy to assume that if we want to stay close to this backed by gold theory, there would just be some sort of tokenized gold on top of the XP ledger, or potentially Ripple coming up with a new plan? But at the end of the day, I don't think Ripple needs this gold backing. Even to confirm with all these standards, I think that in due course, and I did not back this statement up here with facts, but this was said right here, the DOT token has officially changed from being considered a security to being considered an SEC-compliant software in the US. I just think that in due course, Ripple, with the way in which they've positioned themselves, will not need to conform with all these standards which we sometimes see here below these posts. For example, regarding the BIS, what they've said about the different classifications and whatnot. I just think in due course, the Ripple, with the way they've set themselves up, will just be a layer above a lot of these things. Because again, the true vision is just being a bridge currency, right? At least that's what our research has noted. The value of it, again, is debatable, but the core principle is still being this middle currency, partially for liquidity providing and partially for just facilitating transactions in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not 1,000% sure if it will be deemed its entire asset class, but I think as this SEC lawsuit finishes out, and if we look at the way in which Ripple has handled themselves over the last decade already with all these other parties like, for example, FinCEN. And if you don't know, all these different entities in the US, for example, can identify XRP as being a different thing. If you don't remember, FinCEN a couple years back in 2015 said XRP was a currency, but then apparently the IRS could see it as a commodity and the SEC could see it as a security all at the same time. From that perspective, I'm thinking, well, whatever the BIS is doing with their framework, I think Ripple, with the way in which they've positioned themselves, sitting right next to those guys at the WEF, for example, they know the standard that's going to be built. They've been talking to these guys for years now. And I'd say they know as well every single step they need to take to conform with those standards. And if this backing was what they were going to go for, I think they would have probably let us know in some way, shape, or form. And again, one little misconception I should also explain is that many say, hey, Ripple and XRP are not the same thing. Many of these things are going to be positive for Ripple, many of these technologies. And you can see that in many of these quotes, that a lot of this is built for Ripple basically, not necessarily for XRP. But to that nature, I'd like to refer back to a lot of videos from Brad Gullinghouse where he explains in due course, and I have so many videos where I've researched this for so many years, where he says, the hardest part is getting them to sign on to anything regarding Ripple. The easier part is explaining, hey, if you're working with us already, why don't you want to, save more money through this process with XRP on on-demand liquidity. So I'm never afraid that Ripple's going to just do good stuff for Ripple. I always think it's going to involve XRP. And again, you can see from the guys at Ripple explaining why a higher XRP price will be beneficial and better. The only question is, where exactly in all this does the backend come in from? Again, guys, I spent, I think, at least 10 hours reading through so many different people's theories as to why XRP would be backed by gold or why it would be beneficial, but all it really convinces me of is that these are theories, not necessarily based upon anything that Ripple has ever made clear. It's mostly based upon the idea that it could potentially be beneficial and could potentially be a possibility based on the either functionalities, but most importantly out of the, okay, XRP is an intermediary, it's agnostic, or pick a fancy word right here, and thus it complies with all the different factors that a new currency would need to be backed by gold. It's decentralized, it's this, is that, this is that, but nowhere really does that back itself up. For my research, please prove me wrong in the comment section by anything that Ripple's guys have stated before. All I have noticed from my research today and the last couple of years is the XRP trajectory, in my own belief, is, regardless of the SEC, up and up and up. I don't really see any way in which XRP's value over time is not going to keep increasing. And I think what we saw in 2017 is just a small hint of where the price is going to get to over the next couple of months, but especially over the next couple of years as this payment realm works slowly, but them setting themselves a very good foot in the door for the next decade to come. The design was done wonderfully, and even though it might have changed in due course over time, I think they've only increased their vision from being a small peer-to-peer focused yada 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 to, no, let's take on these big banks, let's start really changing the game basically and take up all the money, so to speak. Will it take up 100% of the money? I don't think so, but that's not necessary. Just taking up 1% of all the volume, so to speak, would already place it at such a ridiculous valuation of a company, but potentially also for XRP with the amount of value that it needs to be transferring, that it's always something that not many people can comprehend right now. Just 1%, which is ridiculously high and a very big goal, very admirable, would already just be mental. Now, can it be ruled out? All this backing stuff, I can't say that, but that's because I'm not knowledgeable enough. Is the honest truth here, all these theories I've read just showcase that Ripple's side has never confirmed this, but again, a lot of these theories do make a little bit of sense that it would be very beneficial to many parties. It would just take many different jurisdictions, many different players to shake hands, which is not necessarily likely. But again, many of these guys circumvent that way of thinking by it being a major decision from the high-ups that control everything, like, for example, the BIS. Now, do I think the dollar or fiat currencies are going to be gone in the next couple of years? I think CBDCs will play an increasingly bigger role, and I think Ripple will play a very big role in that, and that's definitely confirmed by everything that they've stated and all the articles which we read every single day, every single week. Do I agree with Brad saying the dollar is, going to keep staying around for a little while? No, because I think it is going to change sooner than we think based on history that a reserve currency stays around for about 95 years. I think it's the median and the mean, which is now changing because the US dollar has been around for a long time. But I do agree with his vision that potentially the next big thing could either be some fractional system or some backed system, certainly, again, or as we, I guess, move into a new standard that they diversify first to combat the US dollar's downfall in the process, right? Which potentially could include some decentralized assets like XRP, for example. Do I think the buyback is going to happen of any sorts? No, there's not really any proof that explains why that would be a very likely situation, but it's mostly just proof against anybody stating that this buyback is likely, especially at these higher valuations. However, is there any max for the XRP price? No, I've not really found any theory that suggests that the XRP price couldn't get above a certain hurdle, or why it would be negative for XRP price to be in the tens of thousands, for example. Again, I do not have any theory that suggests we're going to get there anytime soon. I've just not found anything that showcases why so many thousands of dollars would be impossible, except for market cap restrictions. But again, placing restrictions on a currency is very difficult, especially when you're placing it on a deflationary currency, because all this technology is stuff we've never seen before, and we have yet to ever really have a system in this decentralized nature, right? Some people compare it to gold, but gold is indeed still inflationary. In a similar sense, currencies are inflationary. So with this cryptocurrency stuff, it really might be the first time in history that we really have something which truly is going to exceed like all barriers that we now know in terms of wealth. Because if you look at global wealth right now, it's based upon some core principles, but those can change over time, and especially now that the whole dollar system. I mean, we've seen the video, I think yesterday, of Nigeria, where they're taking out a lot of the old fiat. And I think of Hillary saying that they also want to get rid of cash. People, if you asked them 20 years ago if cash would ever go away, they'd say, no, of course not. And right now we're getting closer and closer to it, even though it's not there just quite yet. But I can already envision a future where indeed CBDCs are the backbone of everything, and things are going to change at that point. Then again, you also have to understand there, like said here on Reddit, there are many people and institutions very powerful with massive global influence who will fight tooth and nail to prevent the US dollar from making its way out. Even though central banks are storing gold in massive quantities, US sanctions are pretty heavy, and we can talk about that for a long time. This is not a game that we can make a really big difference in. We'll just have to wait and see. I still think that a lot of these plans are already made, and potentially Ripple is going to play a way bigger role than we now know of, because they potentially are discussing things way beyond our capabilities of understanding or realizing, as we've seen in a couple of Brad Garlinghouse videos. I think I showed you guys one even yesterday, but I'll show it to you guys again just for good reference.
We announce our customer relationships when our partners are ready to announce that, and is part of working with the industry and not kind of trying to surprise them. Right. We will make those announcements when we and our customers are ready.
The only point I'm trying to make there is there really might be so much more going on in the background that you're just not noticing, that they're just not telling you. Sometimes it just surprises me of how much XRP is being suppressed in many ways, shapes, or forms. That might again be confirmed, or conform with what we've just read. I don't know exactly where it was, but with the idea that there's some very powerful people. And again, just think about it for a second. Isn't it kind of weird the way they're approaching the whole Ripple XRP situation? It really is kind of odd, right? Maybe there's just some way more powerful things at play here that we're not realizing. And conclusion, I'm extremely bullish on XRP. Most things look like it's set in stone, that it's just going to propel in terms of a rocket as time progresses here. I don't really see anything stopping the XRP trajectory towards the upside. Even if the SEC case turns out to be a bummer, I don't really see any way in which Ripple really dies out, because first of all, I'd still look at it and think, ooh, it looks like some crazy manipulation that's temporary, because they can't keep the lid on this fire or this boiling pot for too long. Second of all, I think, this is, again, like I said, a manipulation play. But more importantly, 95% of the world is not taking the same approach against Ripple, against crypto. And I just say they keep on building. The rails are already set in stone. A lot of these major banks, or I'd say financial institutional players, they don't want Ripple to work themselves in, but I think they'll succeed. Then again, it's not financial advice or anything like that. Again, I am buying XRP every single day. You do as you please. I'm just sharing my thoughts here in a really chaotic manner. I know, but that's the way I work. Hopefully you did find it entertaining though, and please guys, think with me here. We cover this stuff every single day. And all I'm making this video for here is for us to open up a little discussion, a little dialogue. So please be kind with the comments. Just be supportive in nature, in sense of just write something that we can learn from instead of just hating on things. And let's figure out this journey together. I know it was a long video. I know not many people are going to watch it, but hey, it was an awesome piece to make and an awesome way to vent my thoughts about it. But yeah, that's it. See you guys later.